Welcome to the Hobby Hour with Dan and myself, Stuart. In this first episode, we're going to be discussing why Games Workshop killed our podcast. Well, not really. We're discussing rage videos on YouTube and really do they benefit the hobby. Well, welcome to the first episode. This is a bit of a new venture for Dan and myself. So a lot of you will know me already because you've seen me on this channel. Some of you will know Dan because he's been my co-host on Out of the Frying Pan podcast, which I talk about loads. And many of you will have come over to watch this video because we've told you to. So this is a bit of a side project so we can talk about all of our other hobby that isn't Middle-earth related. And we'll chuck in some Middle-earth stuff as well. So we thought, why not host it as a bit of a video podcast rather than an audio one and stick it up on my YouTube channel so I can get all the clicks and views, essentially. Isn't that right, Dan?
Yeah, just bring him in to make some extra money.
Fully monetize you, Dan. I'm fully monetizing your friendship. So what we're going to do each, it's not going to be each week. It might be weekly, might be monthly. We're going to do it whenever we feel like it. But the plan is for us to have a bit of a hobby catch up, something we often do anyway, but we thought we'd record it instead. Talk about what hobby we've been up to, talk about the hobby world in general, and then have a bit of a topic each time as well. And we aim for them to be, funnily enough, around an hour long, hence the cheesy name for it. But before we get started, we have to assume that you don't know who Dan is, definitely. So I'm going to let Dan introduce himself now and give you a little bit of a brief rundown about his sort of hobby background and what games he plays and things.
I knew this was coming, but it always feels very jumped on. Justify yourself. So, yeah, I'm Dan. I've known Stu for a decade at least now, I'd say.
Yeah.
From Stu's old Geno 5.2 days. He did the podcast with Tom, his erstwhile former companion, who used to swear a lot more than either of us put together. And then I came over to a bunch of events over at Two Pigs in Cheltenham when it was the Geno events. And yeah, we used to mainly be through Heresy. We really sort of knew each other through that because we both painted back in the day. I mean, obviously, we've both been into it since young ages. We've both youngish, certainly young compared to how we are now. Great. Both took sort of hiatus at various different points in our lives. I worked for the company at one point, GW that is. Varied games, predominantly GW if I'm completely honest, which means some people are immediately, But no, I've got an interest in all things miniatures and wargaming, certainly getting more into sort of the bust painting, 54mm scale models, that kind of stuff. Got a bunch of the coal paint miniatures sat looking at me. But predominantly at the moment I'm doing mesbg, which is obviously the Middle-earth strategy battle game by Games Workshop, which is what we created out of the frying pan over. Sort of ties into what we're doing now. We're both needing to find another outlet for our hobby because Middle-earth's a little quiet at the moment. Neither of us are particularly focused on it, which has left us on a few occasions feeling slightly guilty. A lot of apologies about not doing podcasts as easily as we should do. I think it's both fair to say that there's no point saying something if we've got nothing to say. There's enough of that on the internet.
Yeah.
Although I don't know if adding this to it's necessarily helping. But yeah, so I'm currently doing a bit of Horus Heresy, Games Workshop stuff. Stu was very nice and sent me some Nazis on a couple of occasions, no less. I got the Bolt Action DAC for a birthday, and then you sent me the Flames of War Tiger more recently, which is now primed. I've actually done stuff with that. It's built, it's primed. I do intend. I've got a week off coming. I've got my my Growlgren out, so we can get involved in that. It's one of my favourite paints in the world these days. You can use it for almost anything. Not yellow, but yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I have to admit I am a bit of a GW shill, although it doesn't mean I only do them exclusively, and it doesn't mean I worship the ground they walk on. They make mistakes like we all do. None of us are that holy. So looking forward to doing a bit more, being able to talk about it a bit more, which is quite cool because it's a bit awkward doing it on the podcast. I'm sure you identify with as well.
Yeah.
So being able to mix it up a bit, engage in other parts of the community and the hobby would be really good. Get to know perhaps some of your more regular followers who obviously, I think most of them come to you through the there's a bit through bolt action, isn't there? And then there's a lot of them through the American Civil War stuff, isn't there? The warlord
mostly
stuff.
epic scale stuff. Epic. Yeah, that seems to be with a lot of ears. They seem to be the most popular videos. But it's a general channel, and it's been getting me more and more so recently. So there'll be new subscribers all the time looking at different things. So I don't know which of my subscribers will be watching this. It'll be interesting. Some of them may switch off.
Watch it.
But we needed somewhere to host it, and rather than host it via Out of the Frying Pan, which is we want to keep dedicated to Middle Earth, so we're not quit doing it. We're just on a bit of a snooze until we start playing some games and doing some projects with it again. That's all it is. We're not quitting those games, but we wanted somewhere else as an outlet to talk about the games and things we are doing. That's partly why I set up this whole channel in the first place, was as an outlet so that I could show off and talk about the historical gaming I was doing alongside the Middle Earth stuff. And I couldn't do that on our Middle Earth podcast at the time, so I set this channel up, and it's grown and grown and grown. And as I said, it's going to be the home for this joint venture, but it is very much a podcast within the channel. So this isn't just a Miniature Realms video. This is the hobby hour. This is our thing. But we're just going to host it here because it seems to be the place to host podcasts these days rather than just going audio. And another reason we're doing that is because when we talk about what we've been up to and painting and things, I can put pictures up. So it's not just looking at our two faces the whole time. I'm going to be sticking some images up. I'm going to pop, we talk about a new release. We can actually pop images up on the screen. So it's something you might want to listen along to while you're painting or working or something, but there'll be images and things. So if you do look up at the screen time to time, there are things other than just us looking back at you. And me and Mirror at the moment, because Discord, which I'm screen grabbing this from, reverses the view for me, and because I'm recording it from my screen, I might have to look into something else for it, as there's no fix. But I'm not going to go into a huge hobby background myself. I think I've done it a little bit on this channel, but I'm a long time gamer. I started back in the early 90s with HeroQuest and Warhammer Fantasy. Had a long break, about 10 years, when I went off to university, sort of from about 96 to sometime in the mid 2000s, maybe even longer than 10 years, and then came back with Warhammer Fantasy again. But I've played almost every game system under the sun. So I've been busy with lots of things over the time, a lot of historical stuff recently, and if you're regular viewers to the channel, you will know that it's what things I'm into, because the channel is full of it. If you are new, go and have a look at the other videos, because you'll be able to see the kind of stuff. I'm a commissioned painter for my day job, so there's lots of painting tutorials on the channel. Dan is an awesome painter, so we'll be lots of painting chat. So there might be something, if you're interested in painting or developing your painting, questions around painting might be something we can handle. Neither of us are super high-end rulesy type of people, Dan more than me, so if you're after tactics and things, maybe not the people to ask about that. We're not really tournament gamers, so to speak. That's probably why I enjoy historical games so much, because I do it very much from a kind of very narrative, laid-back point of view, and that's the way I tend to play the non-historical games I'm interested in. So, if you're interested in what I'm interested in, look at my channel at the moment. I'll give you a pretty good idea. Right then, so we're not always going to do this kind of background chat, because that would be boring every single time we do an episode, but what we're normally going to head into, and what we'll do now, is talking about what hobby we've been up to recently. So I'll bat it back to you, Dan, and what have you been up to in the last sort of month or 2 months or so? Give people a bit of a flavour of what you've been playing and painting and doing.
Well, there's been a bit of a more of a flow of activity of late, actually, because I did have certainly the early point of this year, didn't do huge amounts work, as most people will know, and life and family and everything in the way, and sometimes you have to be awfully mature about these things and just set hobby aside a little bit while you crack on with whatever else in life you need to do. But it's been really good in the last month or so. I've been able to sort of get back on the horse. I tend to find when I take a break, I'm sure a lot of people will be the same, that one day you'll just sit down and you'll pick up a model and you'll start painting, and then you kind of get back into the habit.
Yeah.
Although that first model is always so painful. You don't lose the skills, but it is more of a conscious effort to do it. And that model for me was Gothmog, the recent GW one from the Osgiliath set. Yet to finish him completely. I've got to do basing, and I need to paint his warg for his mounted version, but sort of Gothmog as an orc is done. Around about this point, Stu's going to be putting a picture up.
I will do. That's the hiding our faces part. We'll be sticking as many pictures up as possible.
And for that, I've painted up a Mordor troll. Funny enough, also a Skiliath set, because you can never have too many. That makes 2 normal Mordor trolls and a chieftain. Again, I need to base it. We have a friend, a guy called Matt. He runs Generation Shift 92. I need to basically place an order with him. He does really nice quality Middle-earth themed resin basing, so I need to get hold of some bases from him.
Super nice they are as well. You go and check them out.
Yeah, absolutely. Whack him in the link or something. Whack him in the description. So sort of on top of that, I did a little vignette, which I'm recently, just stretch the painting legs, paint some models that aren't necessarily for a specific project or an army. I did Frodo from the Winged Nazgul set, where he's putting like the Osgiliath with the ring. He's, Reese, a sort of friend, he sent that model through to me. People will work out over time. I have a bit of a thing about metal models. I absolutely hate them. I did my time. I'd played 40k and fantasy through the 90s, early 2000s. I've built the old school slan. I've done the Ogre Scrap Launcher. I don't want to do it anymore. We live in a world of wonderful resin and plastic, and I don't want to have to suffer through trying to pin metal models. And I
imagine there'll be lots of people watching this, especially if they're from the usual channel viewers that love metal miniatures. But what you're describing there is building multi-part metal miniatures, whereas a lot of historical gamers, they have to build multi-part.
I mean, all that stuff. I mean, then again, if it's comparatively simple metal models in regimented poses, that kind of thing, I get that.
A lot of the 28mm figures are single piece, and they're lovely.
That's it.
I still prefer a plastic if possible, because I chip, and then you have to cover them in loads and loads of varnish and things, and then it changes your paint color once you put too much varnish on. But we digress a little bit.
But there's also for gaming miniatures, and that's the other side for me. I don't want my carry case to weigh the same amount as a small car, and that is problematic for me. So the benefit of doing these little vignettes and stuff is you can pick up those models you wouldn't otherwise use, because you don't want to game with metal pieces, or rather I don't.
Yeah.
But I can paint a small metal miniature, a Hobbit for instance, and put him in a little vignette. So I use some parts from the new Osgiliath, the Ranger set. So it's got the rubble, and I've got one of Matt's bases, and put it all together. So it's Frodo standing amongst the sort of smashed building and statuary of the city, and it was a fun little thing. Again, there'll be pictures, I'm sure.
There will.
And then I'm currently also on some Emperor's Children, purple Space Marines for Horus Heresy, because my sort of immediate group locally, we've not really touched on this. I'm in Peterborough, Stu's over in Cheltenham, so that's why we're
Gloucester now. Unfortunately, we moved moved a few years ago. Dan, it's now.
Yes, you did, didn't you?
Yeah, it's the rougher part of the county.
Well, I live in Peterborough. It's, as far as I'm concerned, you're living in the walled Garden of Eden compared to here. I've been working on the Emperor's Children. My local group of the lads have been bang on it with Heresy, so I've been working on bits and pieces for that. So I attended the Greetings from the Warp event recently. They're based out of Northamptonshire. They did a Horus Heresy weekend. I just bought an event only ticket, attendance only, and just sat and chilled with my mate Dan and Mike. Painted all weekend. It was just like a bit of a hobby hangout, but live in person. There was loads of stuff going on. They had the Adeptus Titanicus players shouting engine kill and scaring the daylights out of us every time that something died. But really, really fun event. I would recommend any of their stuff. They do various different events. I'm actually participating, or actually running the Middle-earth part of their Specialist Game Weekender over in June. So they're good lads. So I went and did that. So it's actually been quite a lot of hobby going on.
Yeah, there's loads
of late, which is really nice.
But just,
and varied hobby as well, different things.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose I was worse than you when we were recording out of the frying pan. You'd normally have a few things to show, not normally painting wise, but it's as soon as you expand it to all the other games and things you play, it just shows how much that we do still do, even during relatively quiet periods of the hobby. It shows how obsessed we are with toy soldiers, essentially. Even still rule your life, don't they?
They do seep into the cracks a little bit, yeah. But it's good to have an outlet, really, isn't it? So I would imagine why most people do it. Stress relief.
Absolutely. So is that all of your? No, you've been just. Have you mentioned all the stuff you've been doing hobby-wise, or?
I've started to build the Faramir model again. Do a little vignette piece. Matt's done some Gloomy Forest bases recently. They're sort of Fangorn-esque. So I'm having him sort of scaling through to be sort of dense Ithilien woodland. Nice. And then I picked up Denethor as well. I want to paint the Forge World one because he's such a pretty. I want to test doing like objective source lighting from the torch he carries.
Yeah.
Trying to push myself into techniques I wouldn't normally use. So that's what
I'm looking forward to see
that. I'm tempted by Kill Team just as a foray back into the 40k scene. But the new Beastmen have announced recently, they feed into that old school sort of Road Trader-esque 40k, like proper 80s. Listen to some Bolt Thrower, paint some Beastmen, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so,
I remember
tempted by them.
They were in the guard list, weren't they? Back in the when it was the big, was it big chapter approved sort of combined army list back for Road Trader. I think I remember having a few literally at that age.
The Penal Legionnaires and the Suicide Bombers as well.
Yes. God, yeah, I actually had
different times.
Oh, I miss those models. The amount of things I got rid of that will be worth so much money.
I recently gave away a 2nd edition Space Wolf army, full metal, untouched.
Oh,
but I won't spoil who it got given to. But I'd imagine he'll post it to his socials at some point. And there's a likelihood anyone who's into GW would probably know who it was.
Okay.
So I'll leave that up to him.
Yes.
So,
yes, I know who it is. I know who it is. They will do a decent job of it, I think.
I should hope
say no more.
So it's been busy times for hobby. What about yourself?
So it's been a tough year, sort of family wise in terms of time. And I won't dwell on that. I've already mentioned it on the channel and things. So I've not had anywhere near the time I'd planned, but I have been doing stuff. This is the difference between recording this and recording out of the frying pan when I have actually done some hobby that I can mention on here. But most of the hobby I've done has been shown on the channel, but it's been still a fairly busy sort of first, what are we into, 4 months of the year. We've had Epic Pike and Shot has kept me busy. Wargames kindly sent me early review frames of those, which meant I was painting them a little bit earlier than some other people, so I was working on videos and things for those. So I'm sure most people watching this have seen that. If the people that have hopefully come over from out of the frying pan, hopefully you guys, you haven't seen them, it's your first opportunity to see them now, but these are these small epic scale miniatures, so they're smaller than 15mm scale, 13.5mm to the eye, and this is for the English Civil War that I'm painting them. But Pike and Shot era can cover 30 years war, if you like, the same flavour but in Europe, so to speak. So I've been working on some of those and doing some video tutorials and things. That's kept me fairly busy for a while, and then I've been working on some Warhammer stuff, really. So I was trying to ignore the old world. I think we were talking about this before we started recording. I remember saying when they announced it, oh, that's exciting, it's coming back, my favourite ever game. That's not going to be a problem. I'm going to ignore it. So that's it. I'm not doing mass battle games at all now, unless they're small scale. I've got 28mm for Middle Earth, and then all my historical stuff's pretty much in 15mm. I'm not painting big armies again, but just obviously teaser after teaser, the more news that's come out, I knew I wasn't going to be able to avoid it. I'm repeating some of my nostalgia video here, but my son ended up looking at some of my old editions of fantasy they had on the shelf, and it just suddenly clicked for him. And I remembered it clicking for me, and I thought, I can't let this go. There's part of me saying I can't let this go because it's cool for him and cool for me to spend some time playing some games, which is true. But there was also another part of me that was internally was going, yes, I could got an excuse now to look at the old world and look at fantasy again, and I did use it a bit of that as well. So I printed a 3D army from Highlands Miniatures of Dwarves. They've got a lovely aesthetic. It's very GW-esque in some ways. They don't look like GW sculpts, but they seem to have captured the feel of sort of 3rd, 4th, 5th, even early 6th ed sculpts rather than the later 7th and 8th ed ones. And I don't hate the GW 7th and 8th ed ones, but I prefer the older ones. And I sold a full metal dwarf army. Really, it was a lot of collectible stuff, full regiments of renowned stuff. Remember the what was the name of the Imperial Dwarfs they were called in one thing, but I'm trying to remember the name of the character. But I had a lot of stuff.
Did you have the pirate dwarves that were for Dogs of War?
No, the ones with the chuck the machine that chucked the axes. That thing you mean? What you mean?
No, that was Storm of Chaos that came out for, I think.
I know what you mean, but no, I didn't have those. But I had some lots of sort of
they
second and third ed stuff.
There were Slayers with pistols.
There were
something.
Yes, that rings a bell. No, I never had any of those. I had lots of third ed stuff, lots of fourth ed stuff, including sort of early Bugman's Rangers and things like that. Just a lovely army. All metal Slayers. I had a unit of 4. I was playing 8th at the time, and I had 40 of them in a big horde, all metal. Can you imagine how much money is worth it? I got good money for it, but I do kind of regret. I don't regret selling many things, but that was one of my biggest regrets, is selling that army off. But anyway, I bought the files for. I'm a patron now for Highlands Miniatures. Go and check them out; they're really good. And you get your files 50% off as well. I got some printed for me. I've got another new 3D printer now as well, which actually does a good job of them. So I'm printing the rest myself, and I've got this big, nearly sort of 2,500, 3,000 points worth of dwarves to paint, and I've painted a couple of those, and they've gone on as tutorials. And then as the news of the old world start creeping out a bit more, the Bretts were starting to be mentioned, so the Bretonnians, which are your kind of medieval French style faction, for those of you who aren't familiar with Warhammer Fantasy. And it's an army I'd bought towards the end of 8th edition and never painted and never played. It was going to be one of my final projects, and I just sort of drifted out. I stopped playing before End Times. My head was already turned by War Machine at the time, so I sort of drifted away a little bit. So I missed the End Times upset. So I was already, when it finally happened and they killed the game, I was disappointed, but I didn't quite feel it as rawly as the people who were still playing fantasy at the time. But I had this dwarf on this Bretonnian army and sold it. I had a big Empire army, which is my other love as well, and sold it. So they will be my 3 projects going into the old world. But I picked up some Bretonnians, some new on spruce stuff, mainly because I wanted to do some tutorials and start building an army. So I'm doing that as well. And I've got a couple of things coming up as well that's not been on the channel, because I think the last video prior to this one would have been my tutorial for the Bretonnian Peasant Bowman. So some of you may have seen that already. But I've also did a test piece for a Men-at-Arms and the first Knight as well. And I'll do a tutorial for the Knight. I don't think I'll do a Men-at-Arms tutorial because it's so similar to the Peasant Bowman. It'll just be repeating pretty much the same stuff. The only difference is the shield, really, and I'll cover that with the Knights. So those things are coming up soon, but I won't go into too much more because I've got a video half done about that. But let's just say they're kind of bigger size bases, because fantasy's going up in base size, and we'll leave it at that. We'll save that for the video. So I've been keeping myself busy with those, but it's not the volume of miniatures that I wanted. That's my disappointment, I suppose. I wanted to have finished my Flames of War, the US. It's just highlights on a few things. It's probably a day's work, but I haven't got a day. I tend to have 2 hours or something once a week in an evening, and I record a painting tutorial and then slowly edit it over the course of a week. So it's not where I thought I would be at this stage of the year, but real life comes along, and this channel is a hobby, and so I have to prioritise my painting time with my work. So, but I'm still getting some hobby in. I can't complain too much. And we're talking about hobby now. It's not violins needed. I've got quite a few projects I really want to get crack on with. I want to get those dwarves painted. Linked to that, I have actually played some games against my son. So teaching him how to play fantasy, it's 6th edition we've been working on. An edition I never played, funnily enough, but it seems to be one of the most balanced in terms of the army books and things. 6th and 7th are very similar rules wise.
I was starved when that dropped.
Were you? It seems like a good era. I quite like the look of the era. I know 6th is very, very fashionable right now. It's almost your trendy edition to play. I think it's almost your latte drinking top knot bun man bearing. Yeah, I picked it because it seemed simple enough, and also so I'm teaching him the game bit by bit. We've had a few kind of learning games. He's absolutely loving it. He's got an orc and goblin army. I've managed to get all GW stuff, even though could get the files to print it. I've taken him to Warhammer World this year and he loves it. And next year he wants to go to Warhammer World and play a game there. So I was very mindful that he's probably only going to have one army for a few years. It's going to take him a while to paint it. I don't want to get him to paint a 3D printed army and then he gets excited and says, can we go and play in Warhammer World? And I'm like, no, because you've got all 3D printed models. And that's another reason why I'm working on the Bretonnians at the same time as I'm working on the dwarves. So I've got a GW army and I've got the 3D printed army, so that if I do want to go up to Warhammer World with him, I can take the Bretonnians. And they look like they're going to be one of the major launch things as well. And I know if they're in the starter box, I will buy the starter box. So even if I wasn't doing Bretonnians, I would be by the time the starter box come out. So I might as well get ahead of the curve because I know my lack of willpower will lead me to get them. If they're not in the starter box, then well, I wanted to do them anyway. We shall see.
Desperately trying to stay away from the old world at the moment, but I think it'll happen.
You'll be tempted in by high elves, yeah?
Yeah, it'll be high elves if I do it. They've always been an army I've loved, so...
Yeah, I love the game, and if it's got the feel of the game, some people are getting very exercised about it in the groups and things online at the moment, as they always do. I'm much more laid back about it. As long as the game generally feels like fantasy, it's fun to play, then that's all I need. I'm not too fussed. I'm not going to get into arguments about which edition was better. I think it's been quite weird. I don't know if it's because it's my first ever game, but playing the game with him, it kind of came back to be an autopilot, but I don't think I know how to play any particular edition. I think I know how to play some kind of bastardized mix of all the editions that I've played. So there's probably bits from all different editions around. And if they, right now I've got him guessing ranges and stuff. He's only 8, bless him. So it's quite hard on him. But I'd rather he learnt it that way. And if they bring out when they bring out the new game, if it's all pre-measuring, and which I think there's a good chance it will be. It seems to be the modern way. If it is, then things get easier for him rather than teach him the easy way and then suddenly go, no, you've got to guess this and guess that. So we'll see how it goes. But if they release some news over this coming weekend with Fest and over the year ahead, if we assume that the game's going to be out in the next 12 months, if they start releasing tidbits and say, yes, it's all pre-measuring, then I'll just bring that into the version of the game that we're playing until it's released and try and make that transition as smooth as possible. But he's all right. He's getting it.
Doing magic yet?
We haven't. That's going to be the next thing.
Orc and Goblin Magic from 6th edition is brutal.
Yeah. He's going to have some fun with it. He just wants to have fun with it, and I'll let him win. I don't
think you'll have
fun. To. Oh well, he might blow himself up, and
it's how much of your army he takes off the board first is more the issue with those.
True.
But it's good fun. I love
he
the
did
Orc
in
and
some
Goblin
ways.
Magic in 6th.
I'd rather he did. I'd rather things went well for him, because if he gets into combat with his night goblins against my dwarves, it's probably only going to go one way, and it has in our little test bit so far. So I think him having some strong magic might actually help automatically balance against his age, shall we say? Having a magic phase.
The first there was your Dwarf Lord with a Doom Diver. He's going to be out on that for at least 6 months. He'll be happy as anything with that. So
he'll love it. And we've been watching. Well, this is going to skip over a little bit to what we're talking about next, but we've been watching YouTube battle reports together. We've been watching 6th edition battle reports, and my wife's just despairing. She'll come down on a Friday night, and we're just we're sitting on the sofa watching Warhammer on YouTube on our big 65-inch TV, and she's just like, oh God, I've lost him already. But anyway, that's me rabbiting on far too long. What we wanted to do as well each time is just do a little bit of an update. We might not always have this, because if it's a week apart where we record an episode, we may well find that it's going to be the same stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about what we're reading, listening to, or been watching. So most of them will be gaming related things, but it's a good way of putting out some tips and some shout outs for other channels and books and things we enjoy. So what about yourself, Dan? What are you reading and listening to and watching at the moment?
I've been rereading, I'm always reading Discworld, in fairness, but that's not strictly specific to this, and listening to Discworld as well, because the audios are out. I'm listening to Weird Sisters at the moment. Really, really good. I'm reading a 40k book. I'm reading the Araman trilogy. Great books. I've come to those late, but they were in paperback and they were cheap. I think it was about 12 quid or something in my local GW. So I needed something to read. So I've been reading that. I don't really watch huge amounts of sort of hobby related material. I should probably say, I watch all your videos. And to be fair, I watched a good chunk of them.
I'd be surprised if you did. Most of them aren't things you play, so I would be surprised.
But that's why they're interesting.
Okay, yeah.
Because I've seen plenty of Space Marines. I don't need to see any more. Whereas, sort of, the bits and pieces for Pike and Shot have been quite interesting. It's not tempted me. I'll be straight up. It's not. But
I didn't think for a moment it would do. I think if I was going to tempt you with something, it's going to be more likely World War II related, I imagine.
Yeah, of any of those kind of things. Not to say that I don't find those other eras interesting in terms of historical eras, and who doesn't love Sharp?
Mm-hmm.
If there are people out there, I'm sure, but I don't want to meet them. But yeah, I mean, what I have been watching is there's a guy out there, Dave MS Paints. He's on YouTube. I watch a lot of his stuff. He's really good hobby inclusive kind of community. He called MS Paints because he has MS, and so a lot of it's tips and hints for people who have conditions or situations that impact their ability to hobby, and a lot of really useful stuff. I mean, I'm lucky, I'm incredibly fortunate with my health, but for a lot of people, maybe who are watching this now who may not have seen it, worth a look.
He's a funny
and
guy
obviously
as well.
The painting phase.
They're well put together videos, aren't they? For MS.
Well, it's his day job. He does video editing and stuff, and some of the stuff he does is amazing.
The effects, some of the effects and stuff are very cool. Yeah,
and then the painting phase, Peachy, formerly of GW fame, if anyone knows him, Chris Peach. It's just, again, a lot of my hobby is quite wholesome viewing. I can't be doing segue into later with a lot of the, clickbaity, meta chasing. It's not for me.
Yeah.
I've been there and I've done that. So, there's usually stuff I need to wind down from what can be a stressful job at work. I don't need stress in my hobby either. So, yeah, that's... and then I watch the usual rubbish on TV and, popular TV series and all that kind of stuff. No Love Island. None of that. I've been recently watching season 3 of Godfather of Harlem. That's my non-nerdy watching. Forrest Whitaker is amazing in it.
I've not seen it. But...
Really good. Really, really good. What about yourself? What have you been doing other than obviously upsetting your wife watching 6th edition battle bots with your son?
So my reading is normally rule books and things at the moment, but I struggle to read. Not actually read, but I struggle to read, and it sends me to sleep. Since having kids, I don't know what it is, but I struggle to be able to concentrate on it. So my reading is audiobooks, and that's when I'm working. So that's 5 days a week. I'm doing 6 hours at my desk. So I listen to a mixture of podcasts and things. So my audiobooks at the moment, I've been delving back into Gotrek and Felix, funnily enough, linked to Warhammer. Nice.
Because they've redone them all, haven't they? Obviously the first one was it Slayer of the Storm God? They ever did as an audio with Brian Blessed doing Gotrek?
So this is the original story. So back to the William King's ones. I don't know if they've been... when they've been recently done. I think it's Jonathan Keeble as narrating it. But
Skaven Slayer was my favourite.
Yeah. Well, I love the first one's good, but I'm on the third one at the moment. But yeah, as soon as the Skaven are introduced, it's funny. It's an easy read for anyone who doesn't know. It's that kind of hero rip roaring, easy to read tale. Think Sharp but in the fantasy world. It's that kind of well written, and Bill King's a really good author.
Yeah, he is.
There's a lot of Black Library fiction that is absolute trash, and when he wrote the original ones, they were probably in an era where a lot of the stuff was quite poor, quite fan fiction level of and I'm not going to mention names because that's a horrible thing to do, but that kind of fan fiction level of quality, which is fine when you've got young teens reading books about the games they play. There's a market for it, it's cool, but sometimes if you read them you think, I want to read a story about this universe, but you know what, this isn't the quality of novel I like to read. And you know, a lot of people would class Bernard Cornwell as trashy, easy stuff to read. It is. So when you look at reading stuff that's kind of lower level than that, it's not as good. But I think William King's really good. He didn't write him forever. Nathan Long did afterwards, and his are good. I'm not such a big fan of some of the newer ones, but anyway, I'm right at the beginning of the series, so it's keeping me busy. And then I'm reading them as well to Jacob. So, and he's enjoying it very much as well. So I'm reading the first book to him at the moment as his sort of bedtime story, so to speak. And then I'm reading, I'm on to number 3 at the moment myself while I work. And then podcast-wise, most of my podcasts are politics and cricket, so I won't list those. I don't want to get into politics on this, and I don't want to get into cricket because no one wants to know up here about cricket. It's not wargaming related, but I do listen to the odd sort of hobby related podcast as well, but less so now, which is odd because I'm a podcaster. But the We Have Ways podcast, and most of the people watching this that have come from the historical side of my channel subscribers will know that one. So it's We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Dan, have you come across it?
I'm aware of it.
James Holland and Al Murray talking about the World War II, basically. And
they wrote the book, didn't they, on Africa?
Al Murray's just done his first book recently called Command. James Holland has written lots and lots and lots of books in different theatres to do with the Second World War. So he's a Second World War historian, and I suppose Al Murray is himself now. Now he's written a book. Knows his stuff.
I remember seeing people were asking him why he'd written a book, and he's like, "Well, everyone else writes books. Why can't I?" So,
he's a smart bloke. He's not like his He's nothing like his alter ego stand-up character. But anyway, they're brilliant podcasts. They're generally sort of 20 minutes long as well. And I just find them, they're really good to listen to. Watching wise, YouTube, like you, the painting phase, absolutely love it. Really, again, like you, it's a very positive kind of thing. But he also nice to hear some of the background stories and behind the scenes of his days at Games Workshop. And he was there for a long, long time. And then what I remember then, so you mentioned Sharp. He mentioned that he played Sharp using sort of 28mm skirmish style Napoleonic game using Sharp characters and things, but using SPG rules. So,
I saw that.
He mentioned it, so I need to message the show and find out whether he's still got those, because it was him and Duncan Rhodes were using it. I just thought that sounds really interesting. But the more he described it, I thought, well, that's a really good. We know the rule set well because we got a Middle Earth podcast, and I can see now how that rule set could work. Could work for that kind of skirmish game. So you think about the heroics and how that might
Western
work.
Game, don't they?
Do they? I've not come across that.
There's a Western game based on it, and there's rules loosely based on some of the stuff from Middle Earth, like fanning your pistol and all that kind of stuff. I can't remember what it's called. I'll have to look it up. But someone's
for a very low figure count kind of historical skirmish game, rather than the kind of 30-40 models maybe, but even very low skirmish count, I could see it working really well with the hero profiles for your main characters and stuff. You really could recreate Sharp doing what Sharp does in the books and TV. So it just sounded quite cool. But anyway, painting phase. I've been watching. There's an excellent channel. It looks quite new. I think he's been going sort of 6 or 7 months, called Jordan Sorcery, and he basically does. They're like mini documentaries almost, but about wargaming and mostly about Games Workshop. So he's doing a series at the moment, each edition of fantasy at a time. So each episode, they're about half an hour, 40-minute episodes. He deep delves. He talks on camera, but then he cuts to stuff. It's very well put together. He's very clever. He speaks very well, and they're absolutely brilliant. And he's done origins of HeroQuest. So he does the story of HeroQuest like a documentary, story of Space Crusade. So if you're a fan of nostalgia from sort of the 80s and 90s and early 2000s for GW stuff, which a lot of people of our age group, I'm a bit older than you, so I don't want to drag you into my age group there, Dan, but
it's coming.
They are brilliant, and they're good watches because they can half an hour, 40 minutes or so. You can sit down, enjoy it with a cup of tea, concentrate on it, and watch it as a TV program rather than a lot of YouTube. I have one in the background, whereas these I sit and listen to, and they're just so well done. So I definitely recommend him. And then there's so many. I watch too much YouTube, to be honest with you. Partly because I've got lots of other channels and people I'm friends with that I like to keep up with their hobby and watch what they do. Obviously, I can catch up with the Plastic Crab podcast on a week, or catch up that weekly when I'm working because I'm never free on a Monday evening when they're on live. So loads and loads of stuff really. And I don't really watch much TV at the moment at all. It's all straight YouTube. The wife and I have been watching Ted Lasso, and it's a lot better than I thought it would. I really enjoy it. I thought it'd be awful. But again, we won't diverge too much into that because that's nothing to do with what we're talking about. But yeah, I quite enjoyed it. Right then.
One hobby channel, though, before we go, that I did forget about that I've been watching. Do you ever watch a guy called Night Shift?
Don't think so.
His scale miniature modelling is mental. Crazy good. So I definitely recommend that to other people. Lots of really interesting techniques on how to achieve. I mean, there's bound to be people who are going to be watching this who have heard of this guy, but some of the stuff he does about recreating textures and the way of painting stuff, filters, all the way he does ground cover is mental. So good.
That would, a Night Shift. I might have to go and have a look. While we're on YouTube channels, then to give people a shout out. So when I mentioned watching YouTube with Jacob, Rogue Element Gaming, really good 6th edition battle reports if you like fantasy. And then I've been looking at a lot of rumours and things to do with the old world. Obviously, there's quite a few okay ones out there. It's not all just repeating what's on the telly, but there's some nice discussion around it. And 9 Inch Charge actually do some sensible, non sort of making stuff up or getting overexcited about lack of info kind of channel. They're good, so I'd recommend those as well. But anyway, we've been talking a lot longer than we normally would for this section, but forgive us. So we'll have a very short break, and we'll be back with our discussion around Rage video channels and Rage videos. Okay, welcome back to the second part, which is our little discussion on Rage videos on YouTube. So we deliberately gave this a little bit of a clickbaity title, which will make me feel slightly dirty for putting it on the channel. And I don't like clickbait when it really sort of leads to negativity. I don't mind clickbait in general on YouTube channels. I think they're pretty easy to spot, and I totally understand why people do it. You want to get people to watch your videos, and if you're too far from your clickbait, people just stop watching after a minute or two anyway, so you don't get your view time. So you've got to entice people in with a good thumbnail and not get it too far off. But we had a little bit of a joke, didn't we, Dan, with the title of this one. GW didn't kill our podcast. We stopped recording our podcast because we're playing other GW games or something. So if anything, GW confused us with having too many nice things, and there were just too many nice wargaming things out there. So GW has done absolutely nothing wrong. But my sort of biggest sort of disappointment, I will call it, the best thing. There are a few channels out there at the moment that seem to be entirely negative content. So nearly all of their catalogue of videos are clickbait type title with an angry looking picture often themselves with a picture or something, and they're always going after the bigger companies. So it's mostly complaining about Games Workshop, but they tend to go after Wizards of the Coast, Fantasy Flight Games, or is it who owns that now? Who's taken over Star Wars? What are they called? Begins with A. Asmodee. There. So going after them. Yeah. Warlord Games a little bit, but that's the Rage for Warlord Games is still a lot smaller, and that tends to be confined more to comments and Facebook groups. And there will be a little bit of crossover, I suppose, to the community as a whole. But I was kind of wondering why there seems to be a rise in these kind of videos, and are they good for the community? And to a certain extent, are they there because of the negativity you often find in comments in forums, but mostly Facebook groups and things like that. So is the kind of negativity and the moaning about pricing and all of those kind of things, does that then lead into people deciding that these channels are a good way to kind of make content? And I just overall find the whole concept of this is a negative thing as a way of producing something, the whole content of the video is negativity. I find that quite tiresome, really. I don't understand why someone would want to make a whole series of videos when everything they're saying is pretty negative about a hobby, which is a pastime, something we're here to do that's enjoyable. I can't imagine doing it. I can imagine someone getting angry about something and really passionate about something, but not every time they record a video. What's making them so angry about all these things? It doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, maybe it is piles. Maybe it is piles, but I just don't understand why people can be so negative every time. That whole hobby must be such a joyless place, or it's all fake and false, which is what I believe it is. I believe it's a tool to get clicks and earn money, which is fair enough as it is, but then takes away the legitimacy of it and makes me want to watch it even less. Your thoughts?
Yeah, there's definitely sort of two ways of looking at it. I think the algorithm and the way that YouTube and the like work has something to do with it. I think that's possibly an explanation, not necessarily an excuse. There is a sort of a chicken and egg thing as well about, it's what generates clicks, therefore I must do it in order to be relevant and make money because this is my job. And you tend to find that with, I won't necessarily say the most prolific and the most successful content provider, because they seem to be overwhelmingly actually positive, but it seems an easy way of generating it. As there's the general term of it's easier to destroy than create. It's easier to talk smack essentially about something than it is to speak positively about said thing and also engender that kind of emotive response to bring someone along with you. It's far easier to make someone mad than it is to make them happy, particularly about things people like, because that's far more subjective. More people dislike the same things than like the same things, because, like, for instance, we're all annoyed by wasps and bees and things. I mean, I'm not personally, but you find enough people who talk about they don't like buzzing insects, rather than how much they love bees. It's a really poor parallel to draw, but it's far more easy to bring someone along. It's a classic sort of that demagogue sort of behaviour. People have done it. I don't want to necessarily draw any parallels between existing negative content providers and other dictator-like behaviour from history, but there's a way of manipulating people's emotions that isn't entirely dissimilar, is it? We're all broadly human and we all respond to certain types of psychological measures. In this hobby, we're all broadly human. And I think it's possibly an easy way to getting the views that means they can shortcut perhaps having to put quite as much effort in as some others. I can't speak for that. It's not to say that videos that are perhaps more negative aren't well made or well produced. I mean, people clearly put a lot of effort into what they do, and I've got to give them props for that. It takes, probably, as people can work out, a little bit more effort than we're putting in at the moment to make amazing videos.
A lot of them clearly take the time to script it completely, which does take time. And if not, they're very, very good off the cuff speakers, so it looks like they're scripted and well edited together. So there is time there.
Certain other demagogues from history are quite good at that as well. I think you have to wonder, as you say, what a joyless place. This is something we generally as a collective are brought to because it's something we enjoy, it's something we're passionate about, it's a relief from the other rigours of life. Why expend that kind of energy on misery? I know misery loves company, and as you say, I think it is somewhat of the global mentality we have now, internet, people getting keyboard warriorism, being able to say the things that perhaps they wouldn't say to someone in real life because they feel that they've got a certain degree of anonymity or power on the internet. The problem, I suppose, is everyone is allowed an opinion now and everyone has the opportunity to express it. So you get to hear all of them.
We do.
Yeah, and even if you don't necessarily want to. And I also think that perhaps there's a bit of an echo chamber effect going on with that. People with the algorithms are drawn to the things that they naturally are drawn to. People come together. They can perhaps use the fact that they've got a group together as justification for saying we are an entity. And what that also taps into is something that kind of annoyed me, particularly you saw it during the pandemic, where people would make an awful lot of noise on the internet about something they were unhappy about. And then a decision that may have already been made that's contrary to what they're currently doing. For instance, Games Workshop, they did some releases for the Warlord's Titan, and they, rather than release new weapons on a separate sprue, they released it as two separate models.
Yeah.
I doubt that there was ever anything other than the intent to release that sprue separately, but people made such a noise about it that they released the sprue. But is it because they made a noise, or is it because they were always going to anyway? But all the people did was take that as a, we won! So we'll continue in that behaviour forever, and then subsequently for the next 6 months, anytime anyone did anything they didn't like, or if they released a different product that they didn't want, they'd make a lot of noise and the comments would all turn into a bit of a cesspit. And it sort of feeds that kind of behaviour. And the problem we have as well, I think, and I don't know about you, actually I do know about you, but I don't know about most of the viewers right now. You'd want to encourage new people into your hobby. You want new blood. You want new opinions. You want people doing cool things. You want people bringing in ideas that you've not seen before. So you get to see cool models. You get to see new painting techniques. You know, where would modern miniature wargame painting be if you didn't have the military modelers injecting some of their, old, let's face it, techniques? Heresy painting is basically old school, like pin washing and filtering from tank modelers from the 80s and the 90s.
It is, yeah.
So where would you be if you didn't bring those people in? And all they're doing is, if they're building this horrible, great big swirling morass of misery, which is unfortunately what the algorithm feeds, if you come into this hobby and you go, oh, I'll look up Warhammer 3000, or I'll look up, the first thing you're going to see negative videos, and you think, oh, I don't want to be part of that. I'll go do something else. And that's really sad, and we all lose.
We do. I'm aware of that when I see negativity, and this is drifting into the wider behaviour of the wargaming community or the split communities. You see the same behaviours generally over all the different game systems out there. Slightly different topics, but the same behaviours. A lot of some kind of level of gatekeeping of this is the way we should be doing hobby, or the way I want it, or the way I see hobby done in my mind. So anyone who does it slightly different or enjoys a different thing, I'm going to make them aware of that by making some snidey comment or something about that. But I guess if we're talking about behaviour on the internet, and you're talking about the negativity and why they do it, if you go back to customer service, I think there was an old adage about customer service. If someone has a good experience, then you tell 2-3 other people. If they have a bad experience, they tell 10 people. We like to complain, we like to moan, and again, that's probably why these kind of things attract people. And again, I suppose if you think about scrolling through Facebook and a post will come up from, it's probably the same all over the world, but I know in the UK there'll be local news sites. In the UK there's usually something, insert your town or city and live, and there'll be some trashy story on there that's designed to be clickbaity and slightly annoyed people, and the comments are a bin fire absolutely every time, and people have just been completely hooked in by that rage, and it's almost tabloid newspaper-esque, isn't it? And maybe these kind of videos, when they're not a genuine reaction to someone being upset, but they're there's a whole series of them from a particular channel or a channel that does a lot of it because it makes them successful. Are they just wargaming's tabloid media? I suppose maybe they are sensationalist and over-exaggerated and not really getting to the point. Not always, anyway.
Daily Mail face on.
Yes. And they'll be phone tapping next. We'll be but
we'll be in trouble.
It's maybe that's what it is, and you're right. And these things are going to happen anyway, and I need to kind of ignore it and not let them annoy me, so to speak. But we
all have a choice. You can be the change.
Yeah, I mean, I don't watch them anymore. I've watched a few out of interest, but now I've got to the point now where I will, I'm not watching that. But it like you said, and this is probably the most important thing, is that kind of attracting new people to the hobby. There's new people all the time. There's going to be new people. It's part of the miniature wargaming hobby when Warhammer the Old World releases, because there's going to be a whole swathe of people who know that universe from Total War who will come over and play. They're already talking about it in those groups. I don't play Total War because my computer's not fast enough to do it, but there will be new people coming in all the time, and I want them to see all the nice side of the hobby. I want them to see the best of it, the nice community that's supportive, that you see in certain groups. Like the Plastic Crap podcast group is awesome. It's really friendly. Our group for Out of the Frying Pan was always really nice and friendly. Some of the bigger ones, funnily enough, can be a little bit glitchy or gripey and things at time. And generally with size, that comes, which is natural. But it does disappoint me when you see those kind of comments. You don't see it as much in historical wargaming. Historical wargamers, Dan will call the people button counters or rivet counters, and they're the ones that get upset about paint schemes not matching historically. Quite often when there is no full historical precedence or evidence for it. So just as much that when there actually is, and then you'll get the slight aversion to certain companies and for historical war games. In my experience, it seems to be people don't like warlord games. A certain section of historical wargamer has an inbuilt aversion to anything warlord games does. Sometimes they can be genuine points, but they probably get lost in the morass of automatic dislike. I think that's there. And again, to do with size of company, they are the GW in terms of size of the historical world. They're nowhere near as big as GW. They are a very small company. They're less than 200 employees, I think. So it's not a very big company at all. And they just are hobbyists, trying to produce cool models and things. And they won't be to everyone's taste. So you just don't make a video about it. Don't do a negative post about it. Just scroll by.
Yeah. Or barrel in saying, I don't like it, so you shouldn't like it either, which is usually what it seems to amount to.
I don't get that. And this is, it's a slight tangent away from the original topic, but I think they're kind of linked because it's that negativity around a positive hobby. That's the bit I don't get. If someone's had a really bad customer experience, great, complain about it. Complain to the company first for a start, but tell people about it. Get it resolved, and if that company keeps doing bad things, then don't shop with them. But there's an awful lot of very sort of knowing negative opinion about companies out there for people that aren't buying their products anyway or don't like them anyway, and I just don't understand the motivation around it. There's so many war games out there that I don't have any interest in, and I'm not in their groups. I wouldn't dream of posting anything about them and saying, well, I wouldn't buy this because so-and-so does this better. I just don't get it. I just don't get why people would waste their time telling the internet that they don't like something that they don't have any intention of buying or it blows my mind sometimes. It really does. But I'm just misguided and obviously very positive about my hobby, which I love. And I wish more people were less negative when there's no need to be. It just seems like it's a bit of a pit, and it just drags everyone down with it a little bit. But I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what the viewers think about it. Maybe we're being too soft, and there should be lots of robust discussion about things. We have obviously there's lots of different contexts you can take this in. There's the complain about a release by a certain company and you don't like it because it's not X or Y. That's one side of things, and people absolutely have the right to express their opinions on it. My challenge is where you do it and what your motivation for doing it is. I was talking to you earlier, and I posted my unboxing of the Epic Pike and Shot in a few groups. I've not had any real negative comments about it. They had the odd dislike on the video, you always do. But overall, don't have any issues. There's one guy posted a comment, and it was that very kind of general, another one of these fad releases. They never support, Warlord Games never support them, and there'll be a new flavour, a new exciting thing next year until this is the new thing until the next kind of thing. And it's a pretty flippant throwaway comment, really. But and I replied with, having a bad day, because I just don't understand the reply. Clearly don't like it, but why are you engaging in it? I just don't don't get it. But I need to just ignore those rather than reply, because it doesn't do me any good or them any good getting involved in it, because they've got every right to say that if they want to. It's the internet. It's free for them to complain about. But as I say, this is an example of not caring. So what do people think? Do they love to hear in the comments? What do you think of those channels? As I said, I'm not listing any of them here. I'm not going to get into discussions about any particular channels in the comments either. So if you mention them, I'm not going to agree or disagree with you. I'm not here to character assassinate anyone out there. That's why we're talking about it in sort of a general sense. But what do you think about some of those channels that just have negative video after negative video? Do you like them? Do you watch them? Or what do you think about general behaviour in Facebook groups and Instagram and Twitter and wargaming forums around when people get negative or angry? Do you think sometimes that they could be off-putting to newer people joining the communities when they are maybe scared to ask questions sometimes because they're worried that people are going to come along and say, you've painted this the wrong colour, you've done this or that? So for me, I think it kind of definitely would put me off if I was younger or new to a historical period. I know you hear a lot with Napoleonic wargaming, a lot of people saying, won't post in that group or ask that question because I'm worried that people are going to be too sneery and things like that. And
it does have that. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit intimidating from me as an outsider. I know that there are communities that are wonderful. I know the Plastic Crack Boys cultivate a very accepting community. However, I have seen the odd one where someone, I mean, you need to get the picture, isn't it, where the rear-marked jackets and all different colour green.
Different field grey ones, yeah. I think that one people have got past a lot, but it's a really good example that's actually used again and again, but it's perfect. It's a perfect example. And you have the same problems. I'm not having to go historical war games. You have the same problems, worse problems and worse behaviour in GW groups, especially the larger ones. Horus Heresy was awful for gatekeeping. Some of the nicest events I've ever been to have been with Horus Heresy players there, super lovely. But in some of the bigger groups, someone came along and they wanted to play Horus Heresy, and they were using some 40k models because they're from the wrong era. That they would behave in exactly the same way as the button counters would do in a Napoleonic group, for an example. You get that same kind of level of gatekeeping, or why you're using that company's models. It's almost an exact parallel. It just shows gamers are gamers no matter where they are. Get into rules discussions on 40k forums and all of that, and then that can get pretty cheesy and horrible and nasty, and I'm sure it'll be the same with the old world when it comes back. In fact, the old world Facebook group has got about 35,000 people in, mostly good, but there's enough.
Was pretty honking early doors, wasn't it?
Yeah, it got better, but it's still enough of those elements there, and you just have to kind of smirk and scroll by and realise that's just the world and the internet, and that's what it's like. But I do wish there was a lot less of it. So yeah, interested in hearing people's thoughts and experiences on that. Tell us your tales of your own run-ins with people on the internet. It'd be interesting to hear them. Dan, have you got anything you'd like to add before we let these people go and go and do something more wholesome than watching us complaining about war games on the internet?
Well, obviously, thanks for joining us. It's a new venture, certainly putting my face out on the internet, not something I quite like doing. So, and Stu only find out to twist my arm to do it as well. So, thanks for joining us. Done with your face in the
by
all means, I am actually quite interested to hear from anyone who may have watched some of these more clickbaity, GW kick my dog or whatever things going on, that it's actually made a informed commercial decision off the back of it, not just I agree, I don't like this, but in what way was that helpful? Because I'd be interested to hear from the other side of things. If it is something that's useful, educate me. Absolutely, educate us.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. And I think that comes back to, and we talked a bit about this offline as well, so I don't know what we said online and offline, is that I think those videos have a place when they're serious, they're about a real topic, and they're in almost isolation, or there's one or two of them. I think where I start getting a bit suspicious is when whole channels seem to be dominated by that kind of content. But you were right, there will be people that find them useful. Hopefully there's not people that live the whole wargaming hobby career based on the opinions of those other people as well, and go out and make your own opinions on things absolutely as well. But yeah, that's really interesting, because some of the things I feel that I might switch off to now, because I think it's just overboard negativity. I might be missing out some useful stuff, or maybe not challenging when I should do. Sometimes maybe there are things I should be less accepting of as a consumer, rather than always kind of go down that look for the positive rather than the negative kind of route, which I definitely do, and I'm not going to change that. But doesn't mean I'm always right either. So I am open to other things. Right then. So as Dan's already said, thank you very much for watching this first episode. We will be back in a week or two with another one, probably about Warhammer Fest, I think, because that's coming up at the weekend. I'm excited about any news from Warhammer the Old World. I think that's currently that and Middle-earth. There might be some stuff there. So there's two games there that I play that I'll be interested in, and Dan will have some news and stuff as well. I know the watchers of this channel, there's a lot of you that play historical stuff, but I do know from the amount of people watching the old world videos that you're interested in GW stuff and the Middle Earth stuff as well, and play other things. So I know some of you will be interested. We will also have our general hobby ramble at the beginning, so even if you're not GW centric, send us in questions and things. We're happy to answer painting questions or anything at all. And join us for another ramble chat, which is what it's going to be. But anyway, thanks very much for watching. Take care, and we will catch you soon.